Welcome to Leafy Greens today, and welcome to the talk on the unconscious dynamics of problems. So today I'd like to share with you the strange logic that the unconscious mind has, and hopefully help you to understand some of the reasons for your behaviors in life, and just to help to understand why it's so difficult sometimes to make changes in your life. So just to introduce a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from and what I've done, I'll give you a little bit of a history of where I am. I am a clinical psychologist, and I have a practice in the south of Johannesburg. I've been practicing since 1986, and on qualifying from Potchefstroom University, after that, I went and travelled all over the world for 6 years, doing a dance show. So I was very fortunate to be able to combine gymnastics and dance and kung fu. So I travelled the world for 6 years. And then on coming back to South Africa, I started to go on an intense journey into complementary healing modalities, into meditations and body therapy healings. And I just went on a journey into the exploration of the alternate forms of healing other than the mind. And then subsequent to that, I started doing the further training in hypnotherapy, and I completed all the modules of the clinical hypnotherapy for the Clinical Hypnosis Society. And in particular, one modality of hypnotherapy is called medical hypnoanalysis. And medical hypnoanalysis, underlying that, had a premise that the unconscious mind has the logic of a child. So that started to sort of spark my interest in the logic and the thought processes that happen as a child. And on my journeys, while I was traveling for the 6 years, I was on an aeroplane to Canada. And I was sitting next to a gentleman who was reading a book, and he was reading children's stories. So that sparked my curiosity, and I actually started a conversation with him. And I said to him, why is he reading children's stories? And then he started to let me know that he's a doctor of philosophy, and he was lecturing in Canada in a university there. But he saw the value and the depth in children's stories. And he saw it as a metaphor for life, and he was investigating those. So after finding out in medical hypnoanalysis about how the unconscious mind thinks like a child, it sparked my curiosity to start having a look at children's stories as well. And in particular, I started to investigate the story of Little Red Riding Hood, because that story holds a lot of the dynamics of reality as we know it today. It holds all the archetypes, the principles, and the underlying it serves as a metaphor for a hypnotherapeutic model for a lot of what goes on in our thought processes as the child. And so subsequent to that, I went on an intense 11-day vision quest into nature, where I went into a cave by myself for 11 days. And I started to investigate the story for myself in my own healing journey. And I started to adopt the perspective of the child. And I started to run the story through of Red Riding Hood in my own imagination as the child. And I started to notice a lot of strange thought processes coming to the fore. And I started to identify a lot of confusions and things that started to happen while I was investigating the story. So from that 11-day vision quest, I started to see a lot of information and insights as to what's happening with the logic of the unconscious mind. So after that, I just decided to start using it in my practice. And this was 16 years ago. I started to get the people to start telling the story as if they are the child. And amazing things started to happen. We started to get amazing results where the logic of the unconscious started to come right to the fore and started to explain a lot of things that previously wasn't getting answers to. It started to describe a lot of the reasons why the addictive cycle persists and why we stuck in repetitive behaviors and patterns, which previously wasn't very clear. So based on that, in my therapeutic processes, I was learning all the time with each client that was coming to me about different aspects and facets of the story. So it was a wonderful journey where it was interactive, where I was learning as much as the client in the therapeutic process, which is very different to the old medical model, where the old medical model, there's an assumption that the client goes to the therapist and the therapist heals the client. So this is based on a new model where there's actually a two-way exchange, and the therapist learns as much from the interaction as the client. So it is a two-way model where it's more interactive. For me, the definition of unconscious is, it's not very similar to Freudian unconscious, where you've got the unconscious and the subconscious. It's more, for me, the definition of anything that's missing on a conscious level, that's hidden in a cellular memory, is unconscious. So it's the parts of us that is not accessible consciously, that we don't have an awareness of it intellectually or consciously. That to me defines the unconscious. It's the logic, or it's the part of us that thinks that's missing information, that's hidden. So whether you call it subconscious or unconscious, it's those aspects of us that we need to bring to our conscious mind so that we can bridge the two, so that there's a bridge between what we know and what we don't know. So it's basically just those two aspects of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And it is held in the body, in the cellular memory, and it is via the heart as well. Because it's the inner child that lives fully in the heart. So the child does come from the heart. So it's all the same aspect. And if we trace the origins of all fairy stories, there are hidden depths and hidden truths in all of them. But getting to music, there's frequencies which do resonate with the child, and frequencies which resonate with the adult, female and male as well. The solfeggio, I know it's alfeggio or solfeggio frequencies, are ancient codes which are written into music, which does appeal to the unconscious mind. That's why music is such a powerful way of appealing to the inner child, because the child relates to it, even mathematically and musically as well. There is that connection. Right. So do we learn from the past? We think we do, but often we repeat. A lot of history gets repeated, whether it's individually, whether it's governments, and even with time, we often see these cyclical patterns that repeat. So sometimes it's much easier said than done. And how do we embrace change? Because it's often people just say, change your lives, get on with it and do it. But often it's not so easy. We need to know how. So the child doesn't often want to relinquish its ways of behaving to change, because it often believes this is the only way I'm getting my love, or the way I'm learning to survive. Because we learn to buy into belief systems based on how we learn to be loved. So they are quite rigid and fixed because they do have survival value. So we have to work on actually appealing to the child to make those changes. And the child is always imprinted by what it sees. So if it sees its parents reacting like children when they're angry, you as the child are going to realize, oh, well, that's how you react when you get angry. You keep quiet, you go and sulk, or you're angry, or you shout, or you just leave home. And then they learn from the parents who are doing that, this is how you cope with anger. So we only learn by what we see. And we watch the TV, and we see on TV these people acting like children. So we learn, oh, that's how you do it as a child. And these become fixed, ingrained patterns. And before long, there's no access to any other information available. It's like we are walking around as computers, and when we Google search adult, male and female, nothing comes up because we've never seen it. So let's move on now, if you like, before I move on into any more explanations and intellectual rationings and definitions of the characters, should we do an example where you can get an example of your own initial storytelling process? Would you like to do that? So what we'll do is we'll just get you to relax, and you can go into a comfortable state, and then we'll get you to visualize your story and how you're telling it. And then you can get an idea of what's happening in your own unconscious minds. When you're breathing low down below your belly button, you place yourself in your own center. That place of stillness, that place of silence, which holds the void of all creation. Run the story now as far as you can go as the child. If you get distracted, bring yourself back to being the child, looking out the eyes of the child. Go as far as you can in your imagination. And when you've done that, you can open your eyes, being fully present. So take a few more moments for those that are still ending off. Good. So let's go on into a little bit of the definitions of the characters, a little bit of the qualities around each character and what happens, and we'll run through any questions as we go along and what's happening there. So before we go on, what is the journey, do you think, of the child from the mother's house to the granny's house? What does it represent in our life? What is it a symbolic metaphor of? Yeah, growing up. So it's symbolically of leaving the past, leaving our parental authority structures, moving through the dark forest of the perils of the journey of life alone, because we have to, and then getting to encounter the dark aspects of life, which is the shadow. It's encountering the deceptions of the wolf in the forest, how he tricks us, and if we miss that, it's how we actually get deceived and we end up in difficult circumstances. Then we want to see that, is there encounter with the child and the granny in the stomach? And eventually we want to know that the woodcutter comes and solves the problem, and the three emerge triumphant in a picnic, which means we can solve the problems and achieve what we intended to. So it's our journey in life through the challenges and illusions that we encounter to achieve mastery of our life purpose that we've come for. So the definitions of the characters very briefly, starting off with the Little Red Riding Hood. So she is the child aspect. I don't know if you can see that very well. It's the unconscious mind, it's the inner child. The inner child is the key to creativity, play, spontaneity, focus in the moment. Because when you're being the child, you're fully focused in the moment, ideally. Because when a child plays, it doesn't hear any other distractions. And ideally in life, we all need to be able to focus, whether it's in our work or in our jobs or when we're being creative. But we have to be able to access the inner child aspect of us to do that safely. It's also our ability to be passionate. It's our passion in life. It extends into sexuality. When sexuality is minimalized in your life, it's also an indication that the inner child aspect of you has gone through a symbolic death. It's a life force of a person, and it's authenticity. The child is the key to your authenticity. When you are fully living from the heart of you as the child, you are operating from your heart, where you are able to be fully you, just the way that you are. But that's often quite a challenge, because we learn it's wrong to be me. So that's briefly the idea of the definitions of what the child represents. The granny, as opposed, is the future self. The granny is, we want to have a future vision, and we've got to have a goal to which we aspire. So ideally, the child needs the ultimate love that the granny offers. So the granny represents the best future, which holds the highest concept of a role model of unconditional love that the child aspires to, that helps the child to grow. We often are missing that as a principle in our lives, but this is the principle that we bring in to replace our parental role models. So it's an interject, or it's a thing that we bring in as the future self. Because we all know we've got to know where we're going. So we bring that in as the future self. The granny is also our inner empowerment. It's the part of us that can reassure ourselves. It's the part of us that can stand up to darkness without fear. It's the part of us that's actually very whole, very complete. It's our immortal selves, where we come from. We've got to be able to access that. It's also our self-love, unconditional love, inclusive love. What do we mean by inclusive love, would you say? This is the feminine principle we're talking about. It's the female. The granny is representative of the principle of the feminine. So what does inclusive love mean? Why is the feminine principle loving in an inclusive way? If a burglar comes to burgle your house and the burglar says, "I'm starving," the female will say, "Okay, shame, here's a sandwich, but don't come and burgle me again." That's inclusive love. The female will feel sorry for the bad guy because it can't say no, and it's too compassionate. And it's very inclusive. It even loves the burglars and the wolf. So it means it can't say no because it's feminine, it's inclusive, it's very loving. It's the mother that is very understanding and compassionate. The wolf obviously represents in life the illusions that we get in life, of how we get deceived. It's to do with deception, the shadow part of us, because we are the wolf aspect as well. It's to do with conditional love. The wolf says, I love you, but I'm going to eat you. And the granny says, I love you just for who you are, and I'm not going to eat you. But the child needs to know the difference, because there is a difference. So the granny represents unconditional love, the wolf is conditional love. The wolf represents the abusive cycles, the judgment, missing information, the teacher, and the ignorance. The wolf doesn't know that he doesn't know, and he thinks he does. He thinks he's right. So it's the part of us that thinks we know that, but we don't know that we don't know. And so it's the ignorance, where we believe we're fully right, and the wolf does as an aspect. It's a principle. There's nothing personal against wolves in real life. It's just a principle. A lot of people say, Shane, but I like wolves in real life. But it's more an abstract principle of what life represents. It's held by the concept of the wolf, just in case, okay? All right. And then the woodcutter is, oops, we've missed the woodcutter. Let's go back there. Okay, there's the woodcutter. Can't see it very easily. So I'll read it out. The woodcutter is action in actualization. It's the higher vision, because he actually makes things happen. The woodcutter is instrumental in doing something to make it better. He's the one that actually now does the job. Females will chitty-chatty over tea for half an hour about what they're going to do, but they don't do it. It's the male energy that actually now follows through and implements change. So it's the higher vision, because the woodcutter comes from a perspective of looking down on the wolf. So he sees alternatives and he has a higher vision. And it's the adult male part of us that is intellectual. It's the logical aspects of us that knows everything and is very organized, logical, very calm, but has a higher vision and is able to act on the truth of the child's perspective. And it's not manipulated by the wolf aspect. So the male principle is also very assertive. It's to do with how we're assertive in life, how we're able to take charge of things and proactively bring results, having impact. It brings results, it has impact, and it's change for the better. Whenever the woodcutter acts, something better happens. And this is a part of us that we've got to be. Sometimes we don't even have a woodcutter in our story, which means we can't access that state and we can't do it for ourselves. We can't act on what we know. Sometimes we don't have a granny in our story as a principle. So these are all the relevant ones. So let's go into an example, and then through the example we'll indicate a lot of the unconscious patterns that happens. So before we go on, actually there's one more concept that we need to look at, and that is that children don't know what a wolf is.
Don't know.
A wolf is. Children think the whole world is good, and what you see is what you get, because they've never heard of the dark side of life, that you get tricked. Because children always believe whatever they've been told, because they don't know, so they're missing information. So 80%, what I've seen in my practice of people have got some form of unconscious confusion as the child, as to who's the granny and who's the wolf. And is the wolf granny or not? And that's one of the core underlying premises that runs through everything. And all problems stem from one of these things. And it's a very simple thing, but it's at the core of most problems, is that the unconscious mind thinks the wolf is granny. If you think the wolf is granny and you're the child, and you get eaten, and because remember, granny from the child's perspective is the hero, it's the good one, it's the one that I must bow down to, and it's always right, and I'm always wrong. So if you get eaten by a granny, and you land up in a difficult situation that you don't really like, and it's dark, what kind of answer will you come up for why you've been eaten? What will you think? If you ask yourself, why have I been eaten, what answer will you come up with? Why has Granny eaten me?
It's my mistake.
It's my mistake. What have I done wrong that Granny has eaten me now? Or what have I done wrong that I'm in this difficult circumstances? How can I change myself and then Granny will love me? How can I... She's telling me to jump up and down. Let me learn to jump up and down 5 times, because then she'll really love me when I'm a good child. Because I have to please Granny, because that's all I know, and that's the only reference point I've ever seen as a child, is somebody that loves me conditionally. So that's all there is in the world. which means that's granny, which means I have to learn now how to get the love from this granny. And I'll do whatever it takes to get it. This is the logic. And most of us are doing it. So this is what we look at. If you want to see how much does the unconscious part of you know the difference between truth and illusion, how much can you discern on a deeper level? Because that will be the origin of most problems. If you think the wolf is granny, you're going to be stuck with addictions, because you're going to like things that are going to hurt you. And you're going to love things that are bad for you. And everybody will tell you this circumstance, place, person or thing is not good for you. But they're telling you that your granny is the wolf, and you won't believe it. Your unconscious, as being the child, will say, no, but it's my granny, it loves me. Even though it's 2%, I'm used to 2%, so it's better than nothing, so I'll settle for mediocrity. Because the child doesn't know the difference between the love of the granny and the love of the wolf. And it's never been an experiential reality to connect to a granny. So you're stuck with the wolf. And you really think it's granny. Does that make sense? This is quite an important theme. And even though you thought that you might think your unconscious actually knows the difference, that this is not the granny, there's a lot of different applications and indications of confusion that arise later in the process as well. That's why to check, when you got eaten by the wolf, to see, do you have a granny with you in the stomach? Because if you've got the granny in the stomach, it's an indication that there might be a clarity already of what's going on. A lot of people don't have a granny in the stomach with them because they think the wolf is granny. So they're home alone inside the stomach. A lot of people, when they kill the wolf, they don't see the wolf when they get out, which means they think that the wolf is morphed into granny. There's a lot of strange things that happen that shows you there is confusion. But if there's confusion, you can't let go bad things. And you'll stick with your job, stick with your relationship, because it's granny, it's feeding me, it's giving me food, it loves me, 2%. It's all I know, so I'll stuck with it. And I'll fight for it. The child will fight for it. If the woodcutter comes to kill the child's granny, how's the child going to feel? Is it going to welcome the woodcutter and say, please come and kill my granny that I'm fighting for to get 2% love from? It's going to reject the woodcutter. So in conclusion then, as just briefly to run through some of the aspects of that. So the predominant aspect or character that is embodied when we deal with emotional challenges is the child. Most of us are always being the child when we've got problems, where we unconsciously react as opposed to consciously responding. If a role model is predominantly missing, either symbolically or literally, in early childhood. So you could have a father who's physically not there, or you could have a father who's there, but he's emotionally absent. So it doesn't matter whether it's real or literal or symbolic. It becomes unavailable as a state of being. So you won't know how to act as the male adult if you don't see it. And and when managing and dealing with reality, and the child's state of being will predominate. You'll be stuck as the child. You won't be able to change states into the adult male, which means you won't be assertive or confrontational in the right way. So the unconscious mind has the logic of the child, which we said, and the ability to access, embody, and adopt the perspective of the adult female and adult male is determined by exposure to our early childhood role models. By interjecting and reprocessing these inner dynamics towards the balance of the mother-father-child, we can embrace change with acceptance, clarity, self-love, and wisdom. And the ability to act appropriately and assertively on what you consciously know allows the individual to embrace the lessons encountered with a refined level of discernment. We want to be able to discern and tell the difference and act on that. Clarity and integrity that guarantees results, where the inner child is free to create, play, and spontaneously live from the heart. And I believe that's when actually the free will comes back. Does that make sense? Where now you can access the free will. And by integrating the missing information from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind, we may grow, evolve, and experience the authentic self, which is the child. The inner balance that results becomes the center or pivotal point, which is a constant from which to manage the outer turmoil. Because now the child has got a team of 3, and wherever you go, you've got 3 in 1, like a plug. A plug has got 3 wires, and they all do their own jobs, but they work together for the lights to go on. And these are our 3 wires that need to be balanced, doing their own jobs for our lights to go on. Okay. By aligning the mother, father, child within each moment, our life purpose and highest, best future can manifest. So every moment we've got to know, is there a wolf around, or can I play now, or is there a problem? Do I need to be the child, the adult female, or the adult male? And that balance comes through a lot of repetition and integration of those processes. So thanks very much for coming today. I hope you benefited and found some useful information. And hopefully we'll see you again. And if you'd like to, I also do individual sessions where I work individually with people, but also in groups. So thanks very much and have a lovely picnic today.
Basically, from my point of view, starting out, I've just entered university, and being able to allow myself to have success, but also understand why I don't, and why some have more than others, and just the whole Red Riding perspective, especially since I'm still on the verge of being a child and stepping into adulthood. I still have the child abilities, and seeing it from that point of view, and seeing that being able to embrace the woodcutter part of me is very hard. And so through that I think it was very useful, because I can see that success is being able to embrace every path.
I thought it was brilliant. I love Debbie. I've actually been going to Debbie for a while now for different workshops and whatnot, and her process and what she's developed is actually unbelievable. It's literally changed my life. And just the whole unconscious thing, you actually don't even know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and as it comes up you are able to see it and deal with the problems as they arise. So when I started, I didn't even have a granny, for instance. I just had a woodcutter, and so I've developed a granny and learned to nurture and self-nurture in myself. And I loved the talk and look forward to seeing more.
We're attending Debbie's talk here at Leafy Greens, and absolutely awesome. She is awesome. I've known her for many years. She's a very inspiring woman. I think she lives the life that everyone dreams of. I think she's got so much soul and so much depth, and it comes through in her talk, it comes through in her character and just her ways. Her presence is just mind-blowing. I've always loved her. And I think it definitely sparked something inside myself, made me realize how much I have in common with this woman. And how much depth my mom has in her, and how much that comes out in me, and how much I try and fix mom, and how much mom tries and fixes me, and we're just a mess. And I think
we're both fixing each other.
Yeah, I think Debbie sparks that kind of that realization within, and it's nice. It's nice to know that there are people out there that are magical and can make you feel. And Debbie does that for sure.